Hi, everyone. This is Janice Wood. Welcome to a Senior Citizens Forum. A Senior Citizens Forum is being sponsored by Benefits for You Too Insurance Services, where they specialize in or they provide Medicare supplemental plans, Medicare Advantage plans, and prescription drug plans for people that are 65 years of age and older, or for people that are under the age of 65 and they have certain approved disabilities. But today we're not talking about Medicare. I'm here with someone who happens to be my client for Medicare. And he and his sister have been my clients for, a very long time. And I was talking with him the other day, and I found out that he has been in the video industry for a very long time, or he's even had his own television show, radio show in the past. And uh and when I first met him, I met him as in regard to being first my client, and then found out that he and I did business networking in the same arena. And he did videos for people, for small entrepreneurs who who wanted to get out there and talk about themselves and put themselves on social media, Google, and all those different places. And then talking to him last week, he's sort of retired. He's like me. He's sort of retired, and he's come up with this video format for people to talk about their lives. And he's interviewed some really important people, so I'm not even going to try to remember all that. So I'm going to read that off. I mean, he's done videos of people like Ronald Reagan. We all remember him. Gerald Ford, Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Dr. Billy Graham, Apollo astronauts Neil Armstrong, composer John Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on. Carol Burnett. I mean, it's amazing. And here I'm having you on my show, the Senior Citizens Forum. I'm really honored. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure, Janice. And let me just say how important your service is. And it was probably one of the smartest things I ever did is sit down with you and look at my Medicare situation. And you gave me some tremendous advice. And I can tell you, anyone that isn't using that kind of counsel is a fool. You can't figure this out. It's difficult. You need a professional, and you are that person.
But thank you for the compliment. But I want to talk about what you do. And I want to say over the last 6 or 7 weeks, I've been really looking into my background. Where did my relatives come from? What was my DNA? But in the part of it where did my relatives come from, I always have the question, well, what did they do exactly? Yes, it's great that I can find them out there, which I think is amazing. Okay. Uh, but what exactly did they do? What did they do with their lives? What was it like to either leave their parents or the parents leaving their children behind? What was that like? I mean, and why did they do this? Okay. Why did they make these decisions? And, not all the information is out there is accurate that you're trying to, piece things together. Okay. But of course, they didn't live in the age that we live right now. And I know Bob, like myself, we can remember when nobody had a cell phone, nobody had a computer, but we are fortunate to live in that age where we do. And and that information about us, or even the information that I'm finding out about my relatives. Like, I knew three of my grandparents, so I know a little bit about them, but not a whole lot, because when you're really younger, you don't think about asking those important questions. I see Bob shaking his head.
Yeah. In fact, Janice, I'd just like to mention that just assume, has your mother passed or is she with us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, just imagine if you could sit down with her for 1 hour and you had a whole list of things you wanted to ask her about, and you could share that 1 hour, how valuable that would be to your life, as well as your siblings, your family members, your friends, who often would, might look at a picture and say, "Gee, that was your mom, huh? Tell me about her." And all you can really say is what you remember. But now you've got a chance to have a second time around, if you will, and learn all those wonderful stories that she told and some of the meanings and some of the things you were just asking about. Well, you unfortunately can't do that, but using Life Story on video, you can do the next best thing. That is, you can capture them in incremental forms. So you're not just sitting down for an hour, you're looking at short 8-minute chapters of your mom's life, your dad's life, your uncle's life, whoever it is that you choose to gift this thing to. And it's very concise, it's beautifully presented. And every once in a while, a photograph comes in. There could even be a beautiful custom song following that module just to reinforce some of the learning. And that's what Life Story on Video is all about. Now, the challenge is everyone thinks they're going to live forever. Everyone thinks they're never going to have something bad happen to them, like perhaps a stroke or perhaps some level of dementia or memory loss. So therefore, they postpone it, they postpone it, they postpone it. There's not a day goes by that somebody doesn't say to me, "Why didn't I do this with my dad? Why didn't I do this with my mom when I had the chance? I just guess didn't know it was so easy to do." And
I,
that's my driving force.
I think that is that lots of times when you're younger, you don't think about, what your grandparents' life were like. What was your parents' life like as a child? Because we're into your being ourselves, okay? And right now, I'm finding myself. I want to know certain things. What happened to my grandparents? You know, how did they come into the United States? How did all of this happen? And I lost that by not being able to, not asking those questions when I
Sure.
was younger.
And just think all the things that your grandmother, your mother did for you. And when she had a birthday or he had a birthday, you said, "Well, what can I possibly gift you?" Well, for literally a couple $100, you could actually capture their life story on video. And what an inexpensive way to say thank you for all that you did for me. It just makes good sense.
Well, I think it makes good sense, absolutely, because like right now, my family's planning a small family reunion, and several of us are a little older, okay?
Hmm.
And one of the things, not only would we want to discuss ourselves, but we want to discuss what we remember about our grandparents, what we remember about our aunts and uncles. And we're going to sit down and capture that. I don't know if I can use your system, but I'm hoping to figure out how to use your system to do that.
Well, there's several ways, and that's part of my job because again, you talked about some of the celebrities and
Yeah.
very important people, and I love doing that. I'm paid handsomely to do it, but my passion is what about people who weren't president of the United States, weren't celebrities? They were just wonderful people who raised a family, did good in the world. but nobody really remembers them because they either weren't famous or maybe they didn't do something bad. Everybody remembers people who got indicted or committed some kind of a crime or something. No, you don't have to do those things. You can just be a real good person and still want to capture that. And there
But
are ways to do that even though they're already watching from someplace else.
right. But there's way to do that because well, actually, I have two aunts, okay? And um, one aunt is still alive. She's 97 and a half, okay? And I had her on my show because I love talking to seniors to see what they do with their lives. But both of them, both my one aunt who would be up in her hundreds right now if she were alive, she would have been an exception for a woman because she already had a PhD.
Wow.
Her brothers didn't go to college, but she did. So those are things like you may not feel like you're extraordinary, but you still may be adding contributions to society that you're not aware of.
Yeah, and what lessons can she impart to you and
Mm,
other people that you have in your circle of friends or family?
yeah.
Because again, we all need inspiration. We all need to look up to somebody, and what a great story that is. If I can just share with you one of the challenges that so many people have when they try to do this themselves, and let's say you were using technology like this, well, you could spend an hour just rambling around and that's fine. That sure beats the alternative while they're still alive. But when you can actually analyze professionally their life story, and it comes down to around 12 chapters. Could it be 10? Could it be 14? Sure, but I'm just using round numbers. And each chapter was about 5 to 7 minutes, maybe 8 minutes at the most. If you add all that up, you got about an hour, but because they're chapterized, they're not rambling from here to there. So maybe you would want to ask your aunt, what was your motivation to go and get that degree, and how did you do it? Now, she could easily take an hour, but you say, could you just kind of confine that to about 8 minutes? And she could do that with some coaching. So that's the idea. Compartmentalize it, put them in simple chapters, and then if there's appropriate visuals that could be inserted, by all means add them. And that's really my secret formula that I openly share with people. Don't just turn on the camera and say talk. No, you've got to engage them and you've got to keep them focused. Now, with some people who maybe are a little short on the memory stage, you need to prompt them a little bit. So you might say, Aunt May, you graduated from XYZ college. Why did you choose that? Well, even if they didn't remember what college it was, they still remember the story. And all of a sudden, they're telling you the story. So that's one of the other techniques because many people that partake in the program Life Stories, they have what I call CRS, can't remember stuff. Being politically correct here.
I
So
love it.
it can be fun, but the idea is channeling that into chapters rather than just ramble.
I think that's so important because my aunt that's still alive, who's 97, I had her on my show because I like interviewing people to find out what they do after retirement. Because just because you retire doesn't mean your life stops.
Well, we discussed this privately, but I'll just repeat it for your audience. Retirement was designed for coal miners and construction workers,
Yeah,
not for people who use their brains
yeah.
instead of their brawn. So, retirement is so foolish to think of. There's more to life than just saying, well, I used to be. You can still be. Look what you're doing, learning new technology, interviewing people, helping people. And you can do that as long as you're able to do that instead of saying, well, I only got 5 more years before I get my gold watch and then I can sit on the couch and vegetate.
And,
No,
and
got,
that to me sounds so, oh my goodness. Okay.
yeah.
How can you do that? But then there are people like you and I who want to do this. For you, you've been in front of the camera most of your life. For me, if you would have talked to me 6 years ago, I would never believe I would be doing something like this. Okay. I would be like, really? I don't want to do that. That's scary. Well,
Yeah.
I find this to be one of the least scary things around to do.
Sure.
It
It's
just,
a, it's a really a blessing, Janice. And people have that opportunity and they find different ways to sabotage themselves. Oh, you're not handsome enough. You have wrinkles. Your hair is failing, or all kinds of silly reasons not to do something. Because again, it's not all about how you look, it's who you are and how your outlook wants to help people instead of just vegetate. And that's I think that's a very dangerous thing for seniors of any age to do. And some of
right.
them start doing it at 60, and I'm 85.
And I'm going to be 80. Okay. So it's like, you can do this. I think right now I've seen different information come through now that I'm looking all this up and what you're doing. Okay. And yes, you can sit down and you can write a book. Okay. And yes, you can get the photos put in it. All right. I think that's really great. But one of the things that I find with what Bob does, yes, the book is really great. The pictures are great, but a verbal talk telling and a visual with along with the verbal, I find that's got to be more because the personality of the person isn't coming out when you write.
Even if you were a great writer,
Yeah.
it would never have the same impact as somebody smiling, telling the story, kind of crying perhaps while they were telling it, or maybe laughing. This is the magic of multi-dimensional communication, is what
Yeah.
I call it. Now, of course, our technology allows us to then transcribe everything that was said in that module and then professionally edit that so that you have a well-written memoir. So now you have all three dimensions. And, people are either kinesthetic, audio, or they're visual learners. So now you've got all three. People want to read can read it. People want to see it can see it. And those who want to hear it can listen. So you've got all the dimensions covered in one fell swoop. But writing is a serious occupation. And you ask any writer who sits down to a blank screen on their computer, or in the olden days to a typewriter with a blank piece of paper, sometimes putting that first word down is really a task. It's really something that not everyone can do. It's work. The system I've come up with is fun. You don't have to do any of
I
that.
think it's fun, and if you just look at it like you're just communicating with the person that's sitting next to you, it's even more fun.
Really is, particularly if you're doing it with somebody else. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we will find that because we do this all long distance using technology like we're doing now, they may have a daughter or son along with them, kind of helping them through that as we create the piece. And then when we record it, we just make sure they look good and that they have a nice background. They're not sitting in front of a plate glass window and look like a silhouette in witness protection or something, but they look and feel their best. Now, again, are they going to win a beauty contest? I haven't won one either, and neither of you. It's not about how you look. You just want to look your best.
Oh, and I'm not going to get an Academy Award either. So that's because that's not what this is about.
No.
This is about you being you, and you're telling your story in those three dimensions that you were talking about, Bob. And I just think, oh, this is so much for me. This is fun.
Well, particularly if you follow the directions that I provide in the app. I've literally taken, and I teach this course live, and frankly, I got a little frustrated because people would come and then they'd miss a week or they'd miss 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they're way behind. So now you've got to try to get them to catch up. So one day I just said, why don't I just record not the live seminar, but a very tight uh, series of, in fact, there's 9 videos. The longest one, I think, is 4 minutes. So you can go through the whole thing in way less than an hour, either straight through or one segment a day, and you've got the whole concept. But I spent a lot of time in, first of all, talking about the reasons why you've procrastinated up until now. No one wakes up in the morning and said, "Oh, let me take that back. You could get a bad doctor's report saying, guess what? The clock is ticking for you and it's not going to be ticking very long." This might prompt you to start doing something. But normally, if you're in good health like you and I are, praise God, this is something you don't wake up and say, boy, I better get on this today. So, what we recommend is you take the learning and then you take the first step. Now, these 9 videos, the first thing we really talk about is, what is your why? Why do you even want to do this? And so many people come to the live class and say, well, my daughter's been pushing me. My grandson wants to know about this. So rather than keep telling these stories over and over again, the other reason why is the fact that some people are very proud of their accomplishments. And unfortunately, when that time comes, when your expiration date is stamped, and we all have one, we just don't know what that date is, only God knows, then you realize that somebody's going to they're going to get up in front of the audience and start crying, put on their glasses, and start reading a bunch of statistics and stories that have no relevance to the audience. Then somebody in the audience is going to put together a slideshow of family pictures who nobody knows who they are, and then they'll probably put a mundane soundtrack behind it, maybe Feelings or something like that, and bore everyone in the room to death. So instead, why not have one of your video segments up on the screen? And every memorial service has beautiful screens,
Mhm.
large, gigantic screens, in fact. And now you're doing one of your chapters, which might be how I want to be remembered.
Yeah.
Isn't that a
And
better alternative than somebody reading eulogies?
I don't know if you realize, Bob, that our show is seen in all 50 states and in 48 other countries. So
Wow.
this information that you're providing us today is because you put it in a learning using the video. People can go on there, and go into YouTube and find you.
And use any language they want, because if their native tongue is not English, there's no problem. We now have technology that translates. So just so much can be done if they decide. So that's the other reason. The other chapter that I put in, what's holding you back from starting? And we talk about this, and it's not a pleasant subject. I wish I had more hair. I wish I looked younger. I wish. You know, the alternative is looking at life from under the surface, if you will, pushing up daisies, as my uncle used to say. I'm not pushing up daisies. I'm able to look you in the eye, and I look as good as I can today. And that's the most important thing. Forget about how you used to look 40 years ago. Forget about what you could look like if you invested in some form of surgery or plastic whatever's. And look at some of these stars now. Their lips are the size of balloons. Is that important to life? I don't think so.
That's a subject I could talk about separate
Sure.
from this. Okay. But the most important part, it doesn't matter what you look like because you're leaving this for your loved ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you're
And
using
your
your
loved ones love you the way you are.
and they're not looking for the Queen's English here or the King's English. They're looking for the way you talk, and the fact that you're articulate, but you're not boring, and that's where the coaching comes in. So the way we work this is, after you've done the learning, then we hold sessions like this. Only I would say to you, Janice, why don't you pick the subject of how you got into producing your own television show?
Mhm.
And then I would just say, tell me about that. I would then take what you said And then using technology, I would synthesize that and feed you back a way to present that in bullet form. Now, you say, well, why don't I just read it from a teleprompter? No, that reading from a teleprompter is a cure for insomnia because it is so boring reading from a prompter. There's no realism, there's no authenticity. It's just terrible. So with bullets instead, you're able to say, well, first thing I did is the reason I did, and you're very congruent in your story, but it's authentic. It's not staged. It's not prompted, and that's where coaching comes in. Now, will you get a job on the network as an anchor? That's not the objective. It's just you want to look and sound as good as you possibly can without having to go through a lot of expense and time.
And one of the things I want to touch on, your children may not be able to help you do this, but your grandchildren definitely can help you how to do this. I mean, I when I go see the grandkids, the first thing they want to know, what are you up to now? What are you doing with this? Am I going to learn something? Oh no, if you do it this way, grandma, it's going to be better. And if you sat there with your grandchildren to help you, oh my goodness, not only are they helping you put this together for them and their children at some point in time, they're learning about you.
And they can definitely do that. The thing that I think is really important to consider if you're looking at doing this is how are you going to get that grandchild to really buy into what you're doing? And then
Mhm.
you've got to remember they're going through their filter. Now, not every child is going to stay in that state. So, for example, and I jokingly said this to my daughter, granddaughter in law, uh, she's giving birth right now. I said, just tell me, will the child come out of your body with a smartphone in their hand, shooting the whole thing on Snapchat or
Yes.
on TikTok? She laughed. She said, that's ridiculous. I said, really? I'm seeing these children. The first thing they can do is pick up a telephone, a smartphone, and start watching TikTok on it. So, but that's well, right now when they're very, very young. What happens when they get to be teenagers? So it all depends on their dimension, the position they are in their life, their temperament. So that's why a professional just said, look, let me help you to tell it concisely, crisply, and in a way that the youngsters will look at it. But again, the magic number is you cannot exceed 8 minutes on any one subject. Now, a lot of people say, why 8 minutes? Well, look at anything on television. If it's a network show, a sitcom, after 8 minutes, what happens? A commercial. If you're saying, well, I don't watch regular TV, I watch paid streaming. Well, watch any of those shows that you're hooked on. About 8 minutes in, they change the whole dimension of the show. All of a sudden, it was first of all Bob and Janice having a conversation. Now it's Janice and her sister having a conversation. Then it's Bob and his brother having a conversation. So it changes every 8 minutes just to keep the thing alive. So that's why we figure that the anything over 8 minutes would be automatic turnoff. And the other thing is, nobody sits down and says, I'm going to watch all 12 chapters right now. No, they can pick and choose what they want to watch. So maybe they're interested in how you develop your career, helping people navigate through Medicare. Maybe they wanted to learn how you met your first love, what you were like as a child. So they can pick these chapters out and go directly to them using technology.
That is so cool. Okay, because I know as a senior, I'm more advanced in technology than the average person. You're more advanced than I am. Okay,
But we learn from each other.
but we learn from each other, but it's something that's very doable. Okay, and and I know from what you were talking about, even if they don't, I think when you get 8 minutes into a television show, there's still that little break is there, a little black break comes up, and I always want to go, that's where the commercial is supposed to be.
Exactly. And,
Okay.
and frankly, my wife and I, we watch a lot of shows where we leave the commercial on because we can pause it at that point and say, "What'd you think about that? Wasn't it that was crazy?" Or "What was your take on that?" As opposed to just watching a complete show
Yeah.
from start to finish. So there's two schools of thought,
Just,
and now all of the streaming services, as you know, charge you. Uh, and they still put commercials on there. So you don't have much of a choice unless you want to pay premium
they,
prices.
yeah, they have commercials, but they also have those little, I mean, I know a commercial is supposed to go there if it was in that format, depending upon what streaming you're watching. But when you're talking about doing it in 8 minutes, one, it makes it a little bit easier for you. I'm going to say, for me, if I wanted to record myself and my life, it makes that a lot easier, especially if I'm not used to being in front of the camera. Okay.
Well,
Two, when I go
forgive me.
back and my family is reviewing it some other time, they can watch it in segments that's interesting for them. What about those cards that you were talking about to write notes on, Bob?
Well, good. I'm glad you asked that, Janice, because we cover that in one of the videos. But you can use a 4x6 card for each chapter of your life. Now, on the front of it, all you do is you put down the name of the chapter. Now, that could be maybe your education. Maybe you're very proud of your scholastic achievements in higher learning. So you want to talk about your college education. Maybe you don't. Okay. So maybe you want to talk about your military service. Maybe you never served in the military. Forget that. Maybe you want to talk about your first love. Maybe you want to talk about your parents. Maybe you want to talk about your childhood and siblings. So whatever that is, they get one 4x6 card, and all you write on the front is the topic of that first chapter. Then you flip the card over and you put some bullets down to remind you of the stories you want to tell. Now, the most important thing that I coach is stay out of the weeds. In other words, once you start saying it was 1939, it was December the 3rd, the temperature was 82 degrees, the wind was coming from the southeast at 22 miles an hour. Stay out of the weeds. It was back in the 1930s or something like that. But here's the story, not the details. Now, that's what these other services do. They put the details in. Your mother, your grandmother's grandmother, back in December of 1929, did this. Well, that's nice to know, but it's not as important as the story. It's the stories that make this work. So now the little bullets on your screen allow you then, when you have your consultation with me on Zoom, I then say to you, okay, you've got your bullets in front of you, put them right on the screen where you can see them, and you've got 8 minutes, tell me the story. And now you're able to give me that story. I'm already recording it, but this time it's just for practice. I'm able then to digest it and say, 8 minutes came up and you got to your second bullet. How do we speed that up? So by coaching, I can get you to tell that 8 minutes, even if you have to do it 2 or 3 times. Before you know it, you're in the zone, you're in the rhythm, and you're going, oh, I get it now. Stay out of the weeds. You don't need that much detail. What you really want is what's the lesson learned? What's the fun part of the story? And every story has some fun in it. It's, oh, yeah, fun. My father beat me. Well, what was fun about that? One day your dad said to you, go out and get me a stick. I'm going to beat you. And you came back with a little twig and you laughed about it. So there's always a story that's fun. It doesn't have to be all serious.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody is full of stories because we all have a story. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you paint houses or you were a broadcaster. We have a story.
Funny you mentioned that. I was working with President Reagan, and a lot of people really don't know that he was not always an actor. He started out as a sportscaster in a small Illinois town. And in those days, when a baseball team played, you did, the sportscaster only went to the home games. So let's say this team was now going to go to a city. The sportscaster would not go to the game. They would sit in the studio and they would read a ticker tape. And all the ticker tape would say, Bob Chesney struck out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he can't just sit there and say, okay, our next batter is Bob Chesney struck out. No, no, he'd have to bring it alive. So he would say, okay, Bob Chesney is stepping up to the plate now. Here comes the pitch. It's a fastball on the lower outside corner of the plate. Here comes the second pitch. Oh, foul ball, went out of play. So that's two strikes. And he'd go on and on, tell the story. He swore he was watching the game. Well, Reagan said one day he's by himself in the studio and he's doing the ticker tape story, and nature called. And he said, what do I do now? So he cleverly said, well, folks, there's a big cloud coming up. It looks like some rain. So we're gonna have a timeout on the field while they put the tarp on.
That is very funny.
Yeah, and totally true, by the way. So you can
Yeah.
have fun with everything. Life is not all that serious.
I mean, I know one of the people you said you interviewed for their life story was definitely a sports figure that not a sports figure himself, but known in sports for telling stories about sports, and that would be Vince Scully. I
Oh,
don't.
what a joy! What a joy he
Yeah,
was. Yeah, because number one, when he did the game, he had such stories about the player and how they made it to the big leagues and all kinds of details. But he never did it like he was reading a Wikipedia. He did it with that amazing talent that he had, and that was and you never see this on any other broadcaster. He didn't just tell you what was going on, but he told you what was really going on. In fact, that term came out of his career called inside baseball. He took you beyond the playing field,
yeah,
and that was such a gift and a man as you'd ever want to meet. In fact, one of the interviews he did, the people kept asking him, "How long are you going to broadcast the Dodger game?" He said, "You know that's like telling God what your plans are."
yeah.
And all I know is I don't want to be the old dumb fool sitting in the box who can't remember anything. So that's why he bowed out and opened the door for the great announcer that we have now. And he's just doing a great job. He's on national television. So uh, God bless Vin Scully. What a champion.
Right. I mean, it's great that we're sharing these stories, but our stories are just as important. And I think it's if somebody wants to get up and tell a story about me, I would rather you. I would rather show this, unless you got some religious reason why you can't do it. I can't imagine why in this day and age. Okay, but why not? Have a video of yourself getting up and telling some of your stories, because I know when I go to a funeral or a memorial, it's always nice to be laughing instead of feeling very somber about what happened, because I would rather have somebody remember me with a laughter.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, if I can share two things that have come up in my career with
Yeah.
this, because the easiest way is for a person just to meet with me, work through a chapter, record that. Then, if they want to do another chapter later on or that day or following it, but you don't have to sit down and go bing, 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 bing. I'm done with my whole life story, but you could. But a fellow came up to us at a trade show. I'll never forget this. And he said, "Where were you 5 years ago before my mother passed?" I said, "Well, I guess we didn't know each other." He said, "I would give anything to be able to do this for her." So I said, "Well, unfortunately, we can't turn the clock back." He said, "Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I got an idea. I'm a member of Toastmasters and I tell the story of my mother's life. Could I record that?" And I said, "Well, you could, but why?" He said, "Well, because number one, we've got siblings and we have family members who don't know the story." So we actually did this.
I love this.
We put him in a beautiful location, and he told the story, and it was, I'm telling you, we had tears running out of our eyes from laughter and from sadness. But he never mentioned it was his mother until the very end of the piece. It came in at about 8 minutes, excuse me. And what he said was, and the one piece of advice this amazing woman gave me was get your education and become a professional, whatever it is. And I owe the fact that I'm a successful dentist to that one incredible woman, my mother. I'm
How
telling you,
cool. How cool.
you could cut a knife. Now, the best part of the story is not the video. He sent that video to his sisters who had been totally, for the last 5 years, separated. Something happened. He didn't want to go into details, but he called me up one day and he said, "You can't believe this. I'm back in touch with my two sisters because I shared this with them, and it meant so much." So that's another way, something you can do if you're a son or daughter and you say, "Gee, I waited too long," or "My dad can't tell a story without laughing and breaking up, no matter how serious it is." And my dad was in that situation at 62. Every time he started to tell a joke, we had to finish it because these two guys, yeah. So we said,
Going
"Dad, I think we can finish the story for you," but that's what life does to people. But the
going back to the story that you just said about the dentist recording a story about memories of his mother, how heartwarming,
oh
especially that it brought him and his sisters back together.
that's why I do this. It's not about the money. But the third thing I want to share with your audience is the way I did mine. And my son called me up one day and he said, "So I hear you're doing all these famous people, their life stories. How come you don't have one?" I said, funny you would ask me that because I'm hosting a great party for our family on Christmas Eve. Make sure you dress up because each one of you are going to do one chapter of my life. I'll have all the cameras set up. And what we did is each member of the family picked one part of their life, of my life, that they were interested in. And they sat down, and in 8 minutes, it was a conversation, but just about that subject. And I never forget my brother, a younger brother, who I really, we didn't grow up together because he was late in life for my family. And he said, "Bob, you played basketball at the University of Miami with one of the greatest players ever to play, Rick Barry. Tell me about that." And no one had ever asked me that. Nobody cared, but he did. And I told the story of what it was like playing with Rick Barry and so forth. And so it became an important part. So now I've got 18 chapters because I have an unlimited budget, so it's easy for me to do these.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago, I met the woman of my dreams, and now we're going to do a chapter on Nancy and I. And then, since we were too old to have children, we gave birth to Nancy's Cabaret, which is a very successful musical business right here in Southern
Well,
California.
I want to talk about that later because I want to have both you and Nancy on a special that I'm going to be doing, and I hope people will come back and watch for that special when we put it out. But that's another subject. Okay.
Super. So that my point is,
Yeah.
it's never finished. It can always be appended, but if you delay starting, it'll never happen.
Happen. Those are very wise words because that's like that for anything you do. You have it, you know you want to do it. And that just reminded me of a movie that I watched last night on, I think it was on Netflix with Tom Hanks. And he wanted to be an artist and he put his artistic stuff away because he had he had responsibilities of raising his family.
Confucius said it best: the
Yeah,
longest journey starts with a single step.
step. So it's really good. But we live in an age of technology that is just unbelievable, and the technology keeps getting better. Uh, and what Bob has done, has been bringing that technology to you in a very easy platform. So I think that is really great. Bob, you mentioned earlier that you provide coaching. So in that coaching, if you just wanted to take the basic course, if you felt like you could do that.
Well, the first step is I don't want anyone to make any commitment other than to receive the free app and watch the 9 videos so
Right.
that they know what's involved and what they're getting into. Then, at any point they want to, they can schedule a free consultation with me. And then I can go over the budget because they may be a multimillionaire who wants to spend thousands of dollars, or
Right.
they may be on fixed income where to spend a couple $100 would be a stretch. It doesn't matter to me because there's all levels of production. But that would be the first step to actually get the app, watch the videos, and then schedule a complimentary consultation with me on Zoom. And then we can discuss any questions they have and see if we're fit to do this. And then I'd like to know what their aspirations are. Do they want to do one chapter? If so, that's fine. Maybe it should be how I want to be remembered. If they want to do 12 chapters, fine. Let's set up a timeline to do it. It doesn't matter to me as long as you begin. And the easiest begin is say, I'd like to have the free app, the complimentary app, and I'd like to watch the video, see if this is something I want to do.
Okay. Well, here's the information on how to contact Bob. And this is really good. For some reason, you feel you need to contact me. If you can't get a hold of Bob, you can always contact me. If you have any comments about this particular show, I would like to hear them, even though I know this is not a live show, but please send me comments. I love them. We're on E360 TV. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Roku. We're on Amazon, Android, many other outlets, and those outlets are growing. But Bob, this has been like really inspiring. You call yourself, I like on your show, it says the show where it ends up with, what is it? What do you say? I'm go, and then it ends up with a legacy. With your,
Oh, the music. What a blessing
yeah,
that is, because I'm able to take and condense the 8 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever the chapter is, and using technology, transcribe everything so you have
yes.
a beautiful written memoir. But then I also, using technology, have a song composed which summarizes the whole 8 minutes into a 3 minute song. And some of them come out. Some are better than others. That's why I always give you 3 versions of it.
Okay.
You pick the one you like. It's such fun, though, to hear the story from the person and then hear the song to summarize the whole thing.
Okay. But I was talking about you have a little I want to call it like a logo, because I was trying to get the logo up on here and it didn't work, where it says Go Show Legacy.
Oh, life story on video
Right. Okay. And what a great gift to leave your family
or yourself.
or yourself. I mean, I've talked about having a trust. Well, this is just as good as the trust in leaving an important legacy where people can feel you and remember you, because I know I happen to have a garage full of 8 millimeter film in my garage where my father started taking when I was 8 months old. Now,
And
what
by the way,
condition they're in, they're pretty bad.
and those could be used as you're talking about certain parts of your childhood. They could be overlaid while you're talking.
How cool.
Yeah.
Okay. What a great idea. But there's so much stuff out there, and seeing it on video and being able to preserve it in so many different ways to preserve it. Okay. We just saw these horrible fires where people lost everything, but this can be preserved in the cloud. This can be preserved anywhere where you can keep it. It's amazing.
Well,
And
Think about the movies. You mentioned Netflix. Some of those movies were shot back in the 1930s and 40s, and they're now put on video, and they look as good as the day they were created. Some of the movies, when they went to color, are just gorgeous because this is the use of technology in a positive way instead of a negative way.
So again, I want to invite Bob back, and I also want to invite Bob back with Nancy, where we can talk about Nancy's Cabaret. And I want to do a special on that. So, everybody, if you're watching, watch for our special. He didn't know I was going to spring this on him. Okay. But there's so many stories that we can tell about the facets of of your life. And this is another facet of Bob and his wife Nancy's life as retirees. So I want to do a special on that. So thank you so much for being
Thank
on.
you, Janice, and let me thank you again for the great service professionally that you provide anyone that does not engage you to do what you did for us and my sister at the same time. Well, you did them not concurrently, but I was so impressed. I said, "You've got to meet my sister. She needs your help as well." So thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for doing this show. It really means a lot.
I love doing this show. I think I provide such great information like this because there's so many people are now going to know what's available that they did not know was available to them before. So thank you. Thank you everyone for watching a Senior Citizens Forum. Please watch us again. We're on every Thursday at 2 o'clock on E360 TV. Thank you. Bye.
Have you